James, we've seen the polls, we've seen the trends as well. And look, I spoke to Simon Welsh in the last hour, and he says it's really hard for the coalition to be all things to all people at the moment, and they just haven't achieved that in their messaging. What do you think, and particularly what's happening in Victoria?
Oh, if only I knew what was happening in Victoria. The bare minimum I think the coalition get down here at the moment is 3. Anything less than that would be an absolute disaster. But talking to people around the campaign who are familiar with their internal research, they still think they're in the hunt in, weirdly wild places like Gorton. I think they're still talking up Dunkley. The view they've got is that Victoria is holding up for them, or that they have no evidence to suggest that it's going bad. But they also acknowledge that if you take Victoria out of the current, their tracking polls, it's not looking too brilliant for them. The rest of the country is far worse than Victoria is. Is Victoria going to be good enough? I don't know. The phenomenon that Simon was talking about earlier with the people jumping off the coalition and going to minors, that applies in reverse down here with Labor. Like we've seen many times, the Labor primary vote crash, but the Liberal Party's primary vote doesn't really grow. It goes to independents or others, and then it gets a lot of it gets washed back to Labor through preferences. Now I can see a scenario in which there are big drops in Labor's primary votes, but the seats don't fall because the Liberal Party's primary vote isn't high enough. They, really struggle to get the preferences the way the ALP does. The whole preferential voting at the moment, as a general rule, favours the Labor Party and works against the Conservative parties. For every vote that goes somewhere else from the Conservative parties, only, for argument's sake, 70% of it comes back, and that's a problem for them. And then they need to grow their primary vote, and there isn't a great deal of evidence that you can point to that the Liberal Party's standing in at the places they're trying to win is good enough for that.
Yeah.
Moreover, Peter Dutton has become far less popular than the Liberal Party, right? Like if you look at the poll we had on the weekend, and you look at, which is a tracking poll of 20 marginal seats, if you look at that from February, the Prime Minister was far more unpopular than the opposition leader, and he was far more unpopular than the Labor Party. Now, the Labor Party and the Prime Minister are roughly neck and neck. They're both unpopular, but they're not that unpopular. But if you look at what's happened on the other side, the opposition leader's gone from being more popular than the Liberal Party to massively less popular than the Liberal Party, right? Yeah. He's now a drag on the coalition's vote performance, if you look at that poll. And I think you talk to people in the coalition campaign, they will acknowledge this. This is a bad election. If we're talking about how this is a bad campaign, it's been a bad campaign for Peter Dutton. It hasn't necessarily been nearly as bad a campaign for the non-Labor parties. Whether they can turn it around, they really need to.
Trump has loomed large over this campaign as well, and events overseas makes people nervous here. A lot of people don't like Trump, women in particular. So what effect did Jacinta Price saying "Make Australia Great Again" have? Was it as bad as Labor is trying to make out? Is the Americanisation of an Australian election a problem? I don't think, by the way, the coalition is trying to do that, but that was certainly a faux pas from Jacinta Price. Would you agree, at least in places like Victoria, and how that resonates?
Well, look, I don't think they're sending Jacinta Price to Kooyong and Goldstein anyway, right? Except to, gee up the troops. Jacinta Price is a rock star among the Conservative base, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you're saying, if what Simon's saying is right, and that you've got all these sort of Trump-curious outer suburbanites and regional people who are wandering off the coalition to Palmer and places like that because they're looking for a Trumpy option, bringing out Jacinta, who, let's face it, has been in witness protection since she was given the job of, is apparently, re-engineering the government, thinking the big thoughts about how they're going to restructure the Commonwealth government when they get back. We haven't seen her. Maybe she's been in the corner office thinking it all up. Bringing her out and reminding people she exists, reminding people who voted no and were kind of digging that vibe, isn't... I can see there's a plus side to it.
Yep.
I mean, Labor is desperate to try and pin the idea that this guy's going to be Trump, but the evidence just isn't there. And I mean, just because she used the phrase, I mean, what does that mean? I mean, does it make Australia great again? Does not mean necessarily the same thing as making America great again as defined by Trump. I'm watching that, and it just seemed to me like the phrase just rolled off the tongue, and it's kind of like, what's wrong with wanting to make Australia great again? Are we saying we don't want to make Australia great again? Like it's a weird criticism. If you wanted to say if they had some concrete proposal that she was up for that's Trumpy and scares the producers out of people, that would be, that would be a mistake. But she didn't do that. It's more about trying to capture the vibe of the thing, and it didn't work for me.
No, well, fair enough. I think the vibe of the thing being Donald Trump is perhaps the problem in and of itself at the moment. But James, we'll leave it there. We'll talk to you next week.